Hey everybody, Wheelchair Gunfighter here. So this video is kind of in response to a discussion I was having that was kind of we call it a discussion about differences in technique from martial art to martial art for solving problems in the wheelchair. So this video is going to be about wheelchair or reality-based training for the wheelchair. So before I get started, let me say definitively that there are no ineffective martial arts or gunfighting methods. They exist for a reason. The root and apex of all martial arts, all combat systems, are essentially the same. Mastery level being a complete awareness of how your body moves inside a space and how it relates to your opponent. And the root being in all martial arts, all gunfighting methodologies, any self-defense or any defensive level system or defensive type system, is understanding, getting to understand kinesthetic awareness, psychology, physics, and anatomy. So both on your part and that of your opponents. And then everything in the middle is a combination of nuances that we create to solve specific problems. And then we, over time, take those nuances and we develop a system of teaching that and applying them within a certain dynamic. And a lot of people discount classical martial arts because they don't seem to have any application now. And the biggest problem with that is that we have now had those things in peacetime for so long, we've forgotten what they mean, so they don't apply anymore. That we don't know what a lot of the kata application are for karate and taekwondo, that sort of stuff. We just don't know. A lot of that knowledge has been lost. And that's kind of how it goes. After it's not used on the battlefield anymore, it becomes, the knowledge gets lost. It's a combination of the knowledge getting lost, it becoming irrelevant via a change in warfare style, new weapons, etc. And so knowledge lost, becoming irrelevant, and it becoming something else. So it kind of evolving into kind of, say, the sport arena. So moves, the application of techniques become different for a different application. So everything in the middle there, between basic and mastery, that's what that's for. It's to solve a specific set of problems. Now, if to apply a traditional martial art, all you have to do is go back to the root and think about how the roots of your system can solve the problems from an objective point of view. Forget the system. The system was created for an entirely different set of problems. If you're practicing from a traditional perspective, you are training for a different battlefield. You're not training for today's self-defense environment. So now, that being said, here at White Rabbit Protection Strategies, we tend to favor the older application of Japanese martial arts. And the reason for this is that the Japanese self-defense, or sorry, the Japanese samurai martial arts were developed over 1,000 years of constant combat application. Now, the disconnect comes from the kind of the late 1800s, where martial arts were no longer practiced for warfare purposes. So there's a separation of where those techniques were constantly passed on knowledge-wise for the battlefield. But the knowledge still exists. If you go back to the old knowledge of how those things were applied, it's some of the best stuff out there. But like I said, most of those systems now have been converted for other purposes, so it gets confusing as to who's teaching what for what purposes. So besides all that, coming back to the realm of today, we have some of the best systems that we've ever had in coming out of the 20th century for practical self-defense and high-stress combat training. Part of that is we understand the science better. We understand the psychology, the science of psychology, the science of physics as it relates to combat. How we know a lot more about anatomy, how to disrupt the human body in the moment. What bullets do to the human body, etc. We understand how to develop via sports science kinesthetic awareness a lot more effectively. We have a better understanding of these sciences, how they apply to the combat realm, and we understand the combat realm better via many generations of combat footage, being able to review specific engagements and break them down, and then reverse engineering them with the new sciences. So all of that has led up to all of these rather brilliant systems. Krav Maga being one of them, very good transfer of knowledge. Systema with understanding combat psychology. Other systems like combat focused shooting, which directly are derived on your natural reflexes for shooting under stress. Tony Blauer's the spear system, which is based on the flinch reflex. All of this have scientific basing. All of them have a scientific basis. Now, just like any other martial art, the roots, the roots are pretty much the same. Develop kinesthetic awareness, understand how to generate physics and how physics are applied, understand anatomy, what's happening to yours and your opponent's psychology, yours and your opponent's. Those are the same. We have better methods for teaching them now, except those methods, which became a system, are generally derived or generally developed for able-bodied people. Okay, so we're talking about more complicated, how techniques from the wheelchair are more complicated. So a prime example of this is how force is generated from the wheelchair for striking. So let me get my training partner over here. Now, your traditional strike when it's taught is driving off of the floor, translating that energy through the hips, up through the arm, in kind of a rotating manner. So kind of leg plus hip plus arm equals force of the strike. So how this looks when I drive, and I can somewhat drive off my wheelchair because of how I can have control over my legs. So how this looks, right? Now, Will's going to offer some resistance. I'm going to show you what that energy is doing when that happens. Okay? So, as I apply pressure, a lot of that energy is coming back into me. Whenever I'm rigid, okay, so the proper way to teach your everyday martial arts strike, as I drive off the floor, I'm loose until the last second, until I'm rigid to deliver the strike. In that moment that I'm delivering the strike, most of that energy, I'd say most, but a large portion of that energy is bouncing back into me. What you have is, on contact, I'm applying that energy and you have this exchange going back and forth. We're creating a bridge between my connection to the ground and his connection to the ground. So, a lot of that's why you have to condition yourself so thoroughly to throw strikes, to be in a striking art, to condition yourself so much, because you're eating a lot of that energy back. And I've seen numbers that were you taking back about 60% of the energy given during a strike. It's not very efficient. Not to mention, besides all that, to drive at all in the wheelchair is very near an impossibility. I can somewhat drive off of my chair because of the control I have of what I do have of my legs. However, the driving I'm doing is in an upward motion. There's no forward drive. I can kind of crunch my stomach and but I'm still using muscular control. It's all strength. It's all upper body strength. It's all torso strength. There is no torque involved. Any torque I give, would you hold on to me real quick? So any torque I give in a rotating manner, my wheelchair goes in the opposite direction. And you saw that as I applied pressure to Will, my wheelchair backed up. That is what that energy is doing. It's bouncing back into me, and because there's nowhere for it to ground, it just pushes me back. So, not an efficient way to throw a strike. Now, the method that I have found to be reliable in my own training for delivering energy in a strike are methods that come from the very old Japanese styles, the Russian styles. There's a number of styles that utilize this method of soft striking, but instead of being rigid on the delivery of the strike, there's a lot of relaxation behind the strike. Now, obviously, in today's world of reality-based training, this is totally counterintuitive because you tense up under pressure. That's why I mentioned earlier that it takes so much more, so much more practice, so much more stress inoculation to get to the point where you can relax and deliver these techniques under duress. Nothing changes once you get in a wheelchair psychologically. You still have to deal with the same pressures. However, how they manifest themselves stops being helpful to your survival. So, if I apply kind of a driving pressure onto Will, right? I can only generate so much energy because I'm using my muscles. However, if I relax and just allow the energy from the momentum of my arm to become the strike, I can generate a lot more energy with a lot more effort, right? Yeah. Or sorry, a lot more energy with a lot less effort. And it's not that necessarily I want to use less effort, but I can't do as much. I can't drive, I don't have the muscular capacity, even if I was just trying to force a punch to happen, so I have to utilize energies that are already there. So, again, more complicated technique. This is just an example to show that, in a lot of instances, techniques from the wheelchair require a higher level of sophistication, and that's kind of unfortunate in some sense because it takes a lot longer to learn, especially to apply under duress. But this is kind of the reality of it. So if you are really committed to self-defense from the wheelchair, you have to be committed to put in the time for training. This kind of example is very indicative of a lot of problem subsets from the wheelchair. So just bear that in mind. This is what this is the dynamic that we have to deal with being in the wheelchair. The thing that we have to overcome is the fact that some of the solutions are a lot more complicated. They're not based on natural reflexes, on natural movement, on driving forces, which are all things that we do under stress without having to have any kind of training. So I say all of this to say that please bear in mind that some of the solutions, some of the solution styles, some of the solution parameters will require you to utilize parts of your brain that require so much more training to make habit under stress. So if you're going to take this dynamic seriously, if you're going to take the responsibility of your personal safety seriously, then bear in mind that it's going to take more training than it would for a lot of other people in a similar situation.